Hello, welcome everyone. We'll be getting started in just a couple more minutes. Thank you for joining us. Once again, for those of you who are just joining us, thank you and welcome. We will be getting started in just a few more moments. Welcome everyone who is joining us now. We are just a few moments before the starting time, so thank you for joining us, and we'll be getting started in just a few moments. Welcome everyone who's still joining us. We are going to wait just a few more moments because people are still coming in. Thank you for joining us, and we'll get started in just a couple more moments. Okay, well, welcome everyone. I think we're about ready to get started now. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this special webinar about protecting your private and personal information from hackers. My name is James Patrick Wong, and I'm the Director of Student Engagement and Development at California Institute of Advanced Management, CIAM. Before we get started, let me say a few words about today's webinar. This webinar is designed to be an interactive discussion, so we want to encourage participation. Here's how it will work. Once we get going, if you have a question for either of our special guests, you can submit your question via the chat function, and we'll get to that question at the end of the presentations. With that, let's get started. Cybercrimes are on the rise. Every one of us needs to be proactive about protecting our personal data, our financial data, our business data, and really about protecting every aspect of our lives. As our cars and homes become more connected, more and more cyber threats are popping up targeting them. Also, as we shift our lives to become more mobile, hackers are making the same shift, threatening every imaginable attack through our smartphones. Well, CIAM is here today to help today. We have invited cyber protection experts to provide answers and advice. Before I introduce them, I'd like to take a moment to share some information about our institution. CIAM is a not-for-profit school dedicated to finding and educating the business leaders for a new world. Traditional MBAs focus on profit and productivity, and a lot of people feel that the leadership from these traditional MBAs has led businesses to make greedy and destructive decisions, which are the cause of many of our social problems. Problems like homelessness, housing unaffordability, social inequity of all types, including racial inequity, gender inequity, educational opportunity inequity, management worker pay gap inequity, even climate change. That's how CIAM is different. We forge a new type of business leader, true global-minded humanitarians who understand the well-being and development of people and the communities where they live and work can be a monumental force for progress and change toward the creation of a more healthy, balanced, sustainable, thriving, prosperous, and just society. If this sounds interesting to you or anyone you know, even if you've never considered getting a graduate degree before, we have a special invitation for you today. We're having a weekend virtual event where you can join us as some of our top professors teach 9 core business classes over one weekend, Saturday, August 29th, and Sunday, August 30th. There's no charge to attend, so we'd like to invite you to go to www.weekend.mba to learn more about this program and to register. Now let's get started. It's my honor to introduce our special guest speakers for today. Dr. Stan Stahl is founder and president of Secure the Village. a nonprofit community-based response to the cybercrime privacy crisis. Stan is also the co-founder of Citadel Information Group, an information security management services firm recently acquired by Miller Kaplan, a top 100 certified public accounting firm. In addition to his community leadership through Secure the Village, Stan serves on the advisory boards of Los Angeles Cyber Lab and Pepperdine Graziadio Business School's innovative Cyber Risk Certificate program. An information security pioneer, Stan began his career securing teleconferencing at the White House, databases inside Cheyenne Mountain, and the communication network controlling our nuclear weapons arsenal. Stan received his PhD in mathematics from the University of Michigan. Dr. Steve Krantz retired from a 39-year career at IBM in 2007 as a distinguished engineer. For the last 8 years of his IBM career, Steve was chief architect and strategy leader of IBM's worldwide internal IT infrastructure, responsible for the successful computing support of over 400,000 professionals, technicians, and administrators. He holds a PhD in computer science from Nova Southeastern University. Steve is a board member of PFLAG, Los Angeles, and a member of board of the Lavender Effect, local organizations dedicated to the civil rights of LGBTQ persons. He served as director of PFLAG's Southern Pacific region and as a member of PFLAG's national board from 2007 through 2013. Steve was a long distance runner for over 30 years, having completed the New York Marathon twice and the LA Marathon 3 times. For the past 10 years, he has attempted a second sports career as a tennis player. With his late wife, Joan, Steve is the parent of 2 adult sons, Jeff and Paul. With his wife, Annette, he is stepdad to their 2 adult children, Amanda and Eric. They live happily in the San Fernando Valley in Southern California. Once again, as a reminder, this event is meant to be an open discussion, so all participants are encouraged to ask questions using the chat feature. With that said, I'm going to turn it over now to you, Dr. Stahl.
Great. Thank you, James. Thank you first for the introduction and for you and Harish and the California Institute of Advanced Management for hosting this webinar to give us a chance to talk about these challenges of cybersecurity. I'm going to share my screen as soon as I get my mouse over in the right position. And let's see. Let me start this. And let me know, do you see the screen? My opening slide? Not yet. Let me hold on. And there you go. That should do it.
Not yet. There it is. It's
there
starting
we go.
out.
Okay. Yeah, technology, it's always been a problem, you know, never works right. It's not secure. Yeah. Never writes, it never calls, you know, the whole thing. But more seriously, I would, as I said, thank you. Thank everybody for joining us today. We're going to talk about cybersecurity kind of from 2 perspectives. But before we get there, just real quickly, as James said, we're Secure the Village, a community-based response to the cybercrime and privacy crisis with the goal of turning people and organizations into what we call cyber guardians. We're a 501c3 nonprofit. And what you didn't say about Steve is he's also on the board of Secure the Village with me. We're going to look at this from 2 perspectives. And given that CIAM is very much focused around MBA business programs, we're going to look at the information security world primarily through that lens of management, what goes on inside of companies. I'm going to take a look at that really from 50,000 feet down into we won't go too deep into rabbit holes. And then I'm going to turn it over to Steve, who's going to talk about, as he's got 54 item checklist out of his book, Cyber Guardian, Secure the Village Guide for Residents. So with that, let's get started. We're going to look at cybercrime, cyber criminals, cyber security and privacy laws. We'll look at the three places where one has to look to get solutions for information security. We'll look at some management frameworks, and then we'll look finally at 7 true critical success factors. These are the key strategies that an organization needs to implement if they're to successfully navigate the world of cybercrime, cyber privacy, the laws, the regulations, the criminals, the whole 9 yards, if you will. So with that, here's our challenge. We're living in a world where it is much, much, much easier to make money if you're a criminal in cyberspace than it is to do it in physical space. It's much safer. The returns on investment are much higher. You can attack globally 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 and a quarter days a year. So that's the challenge we're up against. And while that was a cute cartoon, cybersecurity is really no laughing matter. As you can see on just the charts here, cyber attacks, the cost to small and medium-sized businesses for cyber attacks keep going up. The percentage of attacks that are targeting small business, that keeps going up. And there is a report in Fox Small Business several years ago that most small businesses don't have the deep pockets to recover from cybercrime. So without just burdening restricting the whole my whole time just to talking about the crime threat, the criminal side, just to kind of summarize it. Basically, we're impacting the entire village. Privacy and security. Residents, Steve will talk about that later. We're looking at things like identity theft and lack of privacy. If you're a business in the village, you've got to be concerned about cybercrime, and then you've got to be concerned as well about all the laws and regulations that are coming into effect that are designed to protect the identity and the privacy of the residents, and then as a country as well. All of this has a major impact on the economy. All the cybercrime does as well. We've got an election coming up. There's already evidence that the Russians are trying to mess with this election like they messed with the last one. They're not alone in that. The Chinese are doing the same thing. And ultimately, given the way that security impacts and privacy impacts everything we do, we're really our very freedoms are at risk here. Just to give you some examples of this. This is just a few of the breaches that have impacted, that we the people have lost identity. We've had it stolen. I mean, there's the 4 that I showed here, but you can add to that Experian, Target, Zappos, Home Depot, eBay, Staples, blah, 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 blah. I mean, it's at this point, and Steve will talk more about this on the defense side, you have to assume that your personal private information, your social security number, possibly your bank account numbers, certainly, almost certainly your credit card numbers, they're out there on the dark web available to the cyber criminals who want to use them. One of the major problems businesses face today is something called ransomware. Cyber criminal gets on a computer. Typically that happens with what's called a phishing attack. An email comes to you. It might say, click this link to learn about whatever they think you might be interested in. It might have an attachment. One of the first hacks of a major security defense company was an attachment that was sent to people in HR. The title of the attachment was an Excel spreadsheet, was next year's hiring plans. People clicked on that link, they downloaded malicious software. In the case of ransomware, that malicious software encrypts your computer. And if you want to see your files again, you have to pay them some number of Bitcoins. And the cost of that keeps rising. Not only does the cost rise, but in addition to charging you to get your files unencrypted, they're now stealing your files and threatening to release them unless you pay an extortion fee. That happened to a law firm, Grubman, Shire, Marcellus, and Sachs. They just happened to be a law firm with critical, with A-list people like Madonna, Facebook, and so on. Another big challenge is called business email compromise. This happens when, let's say, the chief financial officer in an organization gets an email, looks like it comes from the CEO, and it says, I need you to process a wire for, well, as this one's $250,000. These requests can come look like they're from the CEO. They can also look like they're coming from a vendor. The first one of these we saw several years ago. We got a call from a company that had received an email, looked like it was from a vendor. The vendor said, we have changed our bank account. From now on, pay our monthly bill to this bank account instead of that bank, the old bank account. The company, without thinking twice about it, changed where the money was going on the payments. And in that case, I think about $75,000 went out the door. FBI says the last numbers we've seen, just in LA County alone, they know of about $10 million that goes out the door in business email compromise. And keep that in mind, that's $10 million that they know about. There's no law that says you've got to let the FBI know when you're a victim of cybercrime, business email compromise. So you've got to assume that they only know a small percentage of the total. It's not an unreasonably large percentage, if you will. This is a new piece of the threat landscape that businesses have to be concerned about, and that's your IT provider itself, managed service provider, your IT provider. Last summer, it was the first time I'd seen this in a big way. A Texas managed services provider, they got hit with an attack. So they got taken over, and the following weekend, the vendors' clients happened to be school districts in Texas, were all hit with ransomware at the same time. There were like 20 of them. And the root cause of the infection was their IT provider. And ESET, which is an information security vendor, did a study on MSPs, managed service providers, IT people. And sad to say, the reality, what they saw in their review, in their assessment, was that too many IT vendors just aren't taking cybersecurity seriously enough. We see that in Miller Kaplan when we go out and do our first exercise for a new client. One of the things we'll do is interview their IT vendor on their security management practices and run a network vulnerability scan of the client's network. And we always find lots and lots of bugs on the network, easy to get in, if you will. And when we look at the IT vendors' security management practices, we find them lacking. Sometimes really seriously lacking, but always lacking. Never up to what you would consider reasonable security practices yet. So this to me is one of the real dangers, because it's very hard for non-technical people like a CFO or a CEO or the managing partner, let's say in a law firm or accounting firm, to be able to talk to the IT vendor knowledgeably about security management controls. That's part of the challenge that we in Secure the Village like to think we're helping with, by helping educate CFOs and so on into these challenges. Another challenge, and this now goes as much to the home network as it does to the business network, is the idea of botnets. So we all today, I've got smart TVs in my home. I don't, but I know people who have smart refrigerators, like it's going to tell me when it's time to replace my wine collection, that'd be great. But we've all got all these smart devices. We've got cameras. We have a Ring in our house at the front doorbell. All of these things are little computers, and if they're not properly managed, cyber criminals can take them over. They can take control of them to damage you, the victim, the owner of the camera, let's say. We have seen lots of examples where cameras have been taken over by cyber criminals, more, I think, to spread mischief in these cases than to do crime. But it's awfully disconcerting when the camera in your child's bedroom starts talking racist taunts at you just out of the ether because the camera has been taken over by a bad, by a miscreant, if you will. The really serious challenge with botnets is all these computers that the bad guys take over. They can use those computers to do bad things. They can use them to launch what are called denial of service attacks on businesses, which they then extort money from the business in order to stop the denial of service attack. They can use the botnet to distribute malware, send spam, post fake news to social media sites. Basically, it's like they own all these computers. And if you think about, you get, let's say with Facebook, where somebody will post something and then 986,412 people will forward it on and amplify it. How much of that forwarding it on is really done by botnets that aren't even real humans? And so this is just, again, one more of the challenges that we face. Merging it all together, good gods. COVID, one of the realities of COVID is that it has pushed us to work remotely. Steve's going to talk some about this as well, because now we're talking cybersecurity for residents, but it's also very challenging for IT departments to effectively manage. I mean, when COVID first got started, a colleague of mine who's the chief information officer for a critical infrastructure, they had to send their people home to work. She went off to Dell, which is where they get their computers, and tried to order 100 laptops so she could give her people laptops to take home. They could work on corporate machines. And Dell was announcing a 3-month delay. So now, how do you keep the business open where now you've got to have people working on their home computers? So right away, that means IT has less visibility on those computers. It means that the backups from those computers may not always be working effectively. Lots of businesses aren't set up for remote computing, so they don't have VPN, virtual private networks, always set up. You're working from home. An email comes in, it's a phishing email. You're not sure whether or not to link on it. What do I do? And your child comes running in, mommy, daddy, whatever, and now you're distracted. And in that momentary distraction, you click that link because you're not focused 100%. I mean, this is just the sad reality of what we're facing right now. And it's, one of the places people don't think about here is if you've got Alexa. So you're on a Zoom call in your office with all your people at work, and you're talking sensitive stuff. Maybe it's an HR thing and you're talking about maybe having to fire somebody, or maybe you're deciding which of 2 bids to accept for a new piece of business, or maybe you're deciding how you're gonna bid an opportunity that you've got. Meanwhile, your Alexa is on. Somebody says some word that triggers Alexa to start listening, and Alexa hears all that conversation. And now, is it secure any longer? So that's another problem with the work at home. And a final one is insurance. Most companies, well, let me back up. Most companies don't yet have cyber insurance. They should at least look into it. But then there's the question, you've got a cyber insurance policy. It covers your whole network, but now you've got people working at home on their computer. What if their computer is the source of a breach? Is your cyber insurance going to pay for that breach, or is your insurance company going to say, I'm sorry, that was outside your network, it wasn't your computer, so we're not responsible for it? That's one of those places right away. If you're watching this and you're in a business context, check with your insurance. make sure you're going to be covered for these kinds of things. So that's just, again, one more illustration of just the how the threat landscape is evolving. Then in addition to the cybersecurity threat landscape, we've got the legal landscape, all kinds of new privacy laws, and a requirement here in California that you implement, if you're a business, you have to implement reasonable security. I've got a list of some of the laws, the challenges here. Most noticeable, most recently has been the California Consumer Privacy Act that went into effect in January. The Attorney General Becerra started enforcing it in July 1st, and we're already beginning to see lawsuits coming out of the California Consumer Privacy Act. In addition, I mean, you got GDPR for European citizens. All 50 states have breach security laws. Many of them have their own security and privacy laws, including New York, Nevada, several others. HIPAA, healthcare laws, both national and state. If you're a financial services company, you're subject to Gramm-Leach-Bliley. Federal Trade Commission has regulatory authority in anything dealing with consumers. And if you're a publicly traded company, you're bound by the Securities and Exchange Commission as well. And the key piece of the California Consumer Privacy Act from a security perspective, separate from a privacy perspective. So let's say you're a company subject to CCPA and you get breached, and you've got, let's say, 1,000 customers, California residents, in your database. Well, if you've been breached and that information has been compromised, you're liable for statutory damages of between $100 and $750 each, unless you have what are called reasonable information security practices. The law does not go into the question of what are reasonable practices. Secure the Village on our website, we've developed a minimum, what we consider to be a minimum set of reasonable practices. So I'd encourage you to take a look at those if you are in a business subject to CCPA, 25 million or more in revenue, or 50,000 records that of individuals and so on. That you get annually. So if you're subject to CCPA, you want to make sure that you can defend the reasonableness of your security practices. So that's kind of the landscape, the threat landscape, if you will, all the things that businesses have to be paying attention to around security, and some of the things that we as consumers, as citizens, have to pay attention to. I mentioned there's 3 domains here. And this slide lists them. The top domain, the circle with the 5 items in it, that's management. That's what we do at Miller Kaplan, what we did for 18 years at Citadel before we sold the company just recently to Miller Kaplan. But it's managing the whole infrastructure. And what you're looking here is the National Institute of Standards and Technology's cybersecurity framework. I'll talk more about that in a couple of slides. You've also got the legal side, the slide that we had just looked at. You need lawyers here. You need lawyers to make sure that you're protected against all the laws and regulations. You need attorneys to help you in any contracts you're signing to clients, to customers of yours, because they're going to put security requirements on you. And you need your attorney when you have contracts with other people to make sure that they properly protect you. Our companies right now is helping a client of ours. They happen to be a law firm. They're about to start using a new internet services company to help manage some of their business. And we and their cyber attorneys collaboratively are making sure that this third-party vendor will do all the appropriate security management things. So just one place, you just got to get your lawyers involved. The other place, that's the risk, the insurance, you got to get the insurance folks involved as well. With the idea, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. With cybersecurity, you have to assume in today's world something bad is going to happen. It's in some ways it's no different than COVID. You know, we walk out, we wear masks, we wear gloves, we practice social distancing. We don't go to bars that are crowded, all of those things, because we're protecting ourselves. At the same time, you know, hopefully, you know, we've got insurance should something bad happen. So we got to protect ourselves, and we've got to be prepared for when those bad things happen. So that's these are the three domains, if you will, in which security has to be taken care of. So this next slide says, how do you do this? What's the starting point? And it's management. This was just after the Sony attack back in 2014. If you watch This Week with George Stephanopoulos, he had on Major General Brett Williams, who's a retired Air Force general. And Stephanopoulos during the roundtable says to him, so General, if a company comes to you and says, what do we do? What do you say to them? And just, I mean, this is the best 12-second soundbite on security I've ever heard. The number one thing at the board and the CEO level is to take cybersecurity as seriously as you take business operations and financial operations. So here, you know, you're here at CIAM, you're teaching good business operations and financial operations in the context of your programs. You got to take cybersecurity just as seriously. And then Williams goes on to say, it's not good enough to go to your CIO and say, are we good to go? You got to be able to ask questions and understand the answers. And this is maybe the biggest challenge, intellectual challenge, if you will, that business owners, boards, CEOs all face, because they don't know how to drill down into the technology. Their focus is sales or marketing or finance. Typically, that's where you see the executives in an organization, sometimes even technology, but information security technology, information security, very, very different domain. So it goes to what Einstein said, that we'll never solve today's problems at the same level of thinking that God is here. And so we need to help management know how to ask good questions and understand the answers. And again, that's a plug for Secure the Village, because that's part of what we do. So management is absolutely required. And in a homage to CIAM and to Peter Drucker, this quote is not here just because of your relationship with Drucker's philosophy. This is something that I've loved Drucker's work since I first learned about it 40 years ago. And this is a quote of his that we provide to everybody because it's so absolutely true. Only three things happen naturally in organizations: friction, confusion, and underperformance. Everything else requires leadership. And that is so true. Less now than it was before, but we'd go into a company and the CEO, president would say, okay, come get us secure. And we'd start talking to people, and what would we discover is that it'd be the CEO who was ignoring security. We'd send out a phishing attack to see who would click the links and who wouldn't. CEO would always click the links. We'd talk about securing your phone. Back in those days, facial recognition wasn't yet out there. Fingerprints weren't yet there. And we'd have partners in professional services firms making 7, maybe 8 figures say, I'm not going to take this security stuff. I got business to do. Well, if leadership doesn't walk the talk, it won't happen. And that's part of the other message around security, that just, you got to keep this in mind, that management and leadership required. Okay, we're going to kind of shift now and get down the rabbit hole a little bit. What does information security management actually look like? What is it you're doing here? What are the things you're paying attention to? Just like if you're finance, you pay attention to accounts receivable and accounts payable and the general ledger and, your cash flow and, all the things that CFOs know to pay attention to. And I don't know them because I'm not a CFO, but I know the security ones. And it starts with that NIST cybersecurity framework, 5 things: identify, protect, detect, respond, recover. Identify things like, what's your sensitive information? Where is it? Who has it? Identify things like what's our risk? Do we understand where it is, how it manifests, how we can protect against it? Do we even understand our own risk tolerance? Because not all businesses will have the same risk tolerance. Some will be very risk averse, others will be much less willing to take risks, to bet the farm and so on. So all of that needs to be identified and documented. Then you got to start protecting that information. That's controlling access to it. That's training your people and so on. Or you can read uh, the chart. You've got to be able to detect when things go bad. Sadly, it still takes, on average, based on studies we see, somewhere approximately 6 months from the time a cyber criminal first hits your network until you discover it, unless the cyber criminal tells you about it, like with a ransomware attack sooner. If you don't get a ransomware attack or a business email compromise, they can be there for 6 months longer and you won't even know it. And that's the reality corresponding to that is the faster you can find them there, the less expensive, the less costly, the easier it is to recover from this. Then you got to be able to respond. Okay, you've detected the bad guys there. Now what do we do? Okay, have you done your planning again? You guys are a management institute. You're all about planning. You live it, you teach it, Well, it's the same in cybersecurity. Have you done your response planning? Is there communications back and forth? If we had a client, they got hit with a ransomware attack, their IT direct people found it in the morning, and they didn't bother notifying management or us till later in the day. So like 8 hours went on with these cyber criminals still in the network before we really got all the pieces together to begin to managing it. And so on. What are you going to do to mitigate and so on, and then recover that final phase? Because ultimately you got to come back and recover from the incident. You got to get back to where you're running business as usual. The whole process, if you see the word cyber resilience, that's what we're talking about. It's being able to, like, if you remember what was it, the Energizer Bunny years ago, or no, I'm sorry, it was Timex watches. They could take a licking and go right on ticking. You want your business to be that same way. Another rabbit hole to go down, the NIST framework's not the only one. The Center for Internet Security also has a framework. This is much more focused on the technology side directly. And it's not an either or. I mean, our clients will use both of these frameworks as tools in helping understand what it is that they need to manage. So I show this as well, so that when it's time to go look a little deeper down these rabbit holes, you'll know to go look at the Center for Internet Security. Their framework is such that the evidence seems to be that if you implement even the top like 15 of these, you'll block 80% of attacks, maybe more than that. So it's really a valuable set of tools and controls. All of that, let's step back very strategically. We're going to end up at strategy. What are we really trying to do here? 4 things. First, be a hard target. As much as we can, let's keep them out. Let's not let the bad guys in. Second, be resilient. Identify when they get in, recover quickly when they get in, get them out, get back to business as usual. Third, you want to be legally defendable with commercially reasonable practices. Nobody expects you to be as secure, have the same security controls as the NSA, unless you're the NSA. If you're an ordinary business, you've got to be reasonable. That's a combination discussion between companies like ours and your attorneys to work through that. One of the things we have going at Secure the Village is a group that meets every week composed of attorneys and cybersecurity practitioners, and we're working at putting together some information to help businesses even do a better job of understanding commercial reasonableness. But that's something you want to get done, and you want to minimize the cost. Particularly in a COVID world, budgets are very, very, very tight. There's so much you can be doing that doesn't cost a lot of money and that gives you really great returns. Most important of which is leadership that I mentioned before, because otherwise you get, what was it that Deming said, confusion and all those other bad things. So these are the 4 goals of cybersecurity. And here are the critical success factors, the key strategies. Strategy 1, put somebody in charge, per the Drucker quote, establish leadership and support them with expertise. Cybersecurity management is a holistic endeavor. It touches everybody in the company. The leadership should have a broad enough purview to be able to touch everybody in the company, and they need subject matter expertise as well. We have found in the absence of that, they often will go down wrong paths or they won't get things done. Second, implement framework-based policies and standards. Again, this is management 101 stuff. Get them to, based on a framework like the NIST cybersecurity framework, the CIS 20, do those. Third, identify, inventory, and control your sensitive information. If you don't know where it is, you can't protect it. And somebody's got to make the hard decisions, like, okay, Steve, you're entitled to this information because you need it for your job. You're IT, you need that. James, you're not. You don't need it this. You need other stuff, but you don't need the financial information, let's say. So we're not going to share that with you, but we're going to share all the development and education stuff with you. But Steve, you don't need that. So, make those decisions. Give people access only to that which they need to do their job. Third, or fourth, sorry, train and educate the people. This is a culture challenge more than anything else. Again, that's where leadership comes in. Fifth, you got to manage your vendors and the third parties with which you're sharing information. That's actually built into the reasonableness law in California. And again, among the vendors, your IT vendors, they've got keys to the kingdom. So you really want to be careful with them. Connected to that, you want to make sure that IT is managed, not just can we get our work done? That's what IT traditionally has been tasked with doing. But now we have to task them as well with managing this whole network and all the information in it from a security point of view. And finally, 7, be prepared. As I said earlier, it's not if, it's when. Have incident response and business continuity plans. Have them, develop them, train people in them, test them, do tabletop exercises, running what if scenarios where you bring in your executives. Really be prepared for when bad stuff happens. And again, not to overemphasize it, because you can't overemphasize it. Leadership and culture are the key drivers here. You got to integrate cyber resilience into the organization culture. It's the greatest bang for the buck. It's the keys to cost avoidance, and leadership begets leadership. So when an organization has good leadership, that'll naturally transfer over into the cyber realm. And if they're still a little, flaky on their leadership, they can use the cybersecurity piece as a way to amplify, augment, train themselves into being good leaders. So it's a win-win both ways. So with that, I'm going to shut up for a few minutes and turn it over to Steve. And then I'll be back at the end to both to participate in questions, but to get some final roundup, wrap-up slides as well. So James, thanks so much.
Thank you, Dr. Stahl. That was excellent. A lot of exciting information. We'll go ahead and allow a couple of seconds for Steve to share a screen. He's already doing that. Great. Let me just do a quick reminder to our audience that we have had some questions coming in over the chat feature. If you have questions, please remember to submit them at the chat. And at the end of this next presentation, we'll get to everyone's questions. Thank you. Steve.
Good afternoon, everyone. And Stan's a tough act to follow. You really came alive with the NIST framework. You woke me up, Stan, and I enjoyed listening to your passionate advice to business. I'm going to focus much more on the individual. That's the focus of my my research and my book. I'm part of Secure the Village, as Stan indicated, and I'm proud to be part of it. To be part of an organization that intends to be a model for our communities, not only Los Angeles, but others, in self-protection and business protection. This is my favorite cartoon that I stole from Stan. shamelessly stole, and it's a lesson. I see myself as that little Red Riding Hood and worry about the wolf along the way. Just some basic intro materials. Americans in cybersecurity, half of us don't trust our modern institutions, and we see that today in the news, that there's a lot of disinformation and confusion, which is sad to me because I see things getting worse in my long life. A majority of us have personally experienced a major data breach, whether we're aware of it or not. So what do I define as personal cybersecurity? It's maintaining control of your personal information while using your devices. We don't want unintended exposure of our personal information, and we want to operate securely everywhere. Who's interested in you? Well, your banks, your insurance companies, your mortgage lenders, if you're a homeowner, your marketing and advertising firms want to sell you stuff. Ditto for the retail stores. Then the people who are interested in your reputation for good, that would be your spouse, perhaps. But then there are the people seeking to hide behind your reputation for gain, the bullies, thieves, the scammers. So what you have to, it's important, I think, to assess your personal risk, and depending on what activities you want to engage in, a focus on what's online about you and your family. What is your exposure to fraud, extortion, embarrassment? And you can see some of the examples I give below those major bullets. Some of us are take more risk than others. I take limited risk, and I'm very careful. And the purpose of this lecture is to focus on that. And Stan mentioned my 54 do's and don'ts. You can all breathe a sigh of relief. I will not go through all 54 in this presentation. I can see James. Oh, he's wiping the sweat from his brow. Oh my God, is this guy really going to bore the hell out? No, I'm going to try hard to be a little bit flip and a little bit and a lot informative, but boring I try not to be. What's your home cyber risk? How many computers do you have? How many devices that are connected to your home network? Do you have non-family members access it when they come over to visit? There's a risk. Are you active on your social media sites? And I'm echoing one of Stan's slides. I focus on the Equifax breach that we recently learned was the fault of the Chinese. Terrible statement about the management of Equifax. For those of you who are going into business, emulating the Equifax management team would be the last thing on my list. I look at the 2018 Russian attack on our physical infrastructure as something very, very frightening. Chinese again in 2018 hitting Marriott, and then this erratic loaner that hit Capital One. What you can glean from this is most of your personal data that, well, most may be an overstatement, but certain key facts about you are online. And to find out, and if a major breach occurs, change all your passwords. That would be if it's in the news that a company like Equifax got hit, or Capital One, and you have a Capital One card, that's the signal. Not a regular monthly, quarterly, annual event, but something that is in the news. That's the time. The dark web is something that scares me. This is a screenshot from the dark web. It's hard to get to. You got to know what you're doing and use certain tools like Tor and DuckDuckGo to get in there. This particular screenshot is like an Amazon, underworld Amazon, where counterfeit things, drugs, child porn, horrible things are being sold freely. It's got features like Amazon offers with Prime, and it's just stunning how criminality can have such a marketing flavor. So it's something to be aware of and worry about. And if you want to check your exposure, go to that web address, haveibeenpawned.com, and if you've been pawned or if you've been taken over, it'll show your email address and associated breaches. So let me walk you through what I call the story of a cybercrime, step by step, left to right. Number one, you're that gentleman in the brown suit. You open an email, you click on a link or open an attachment that installs malware. That's that little green guy. That's the malware that I'm representing it. Step two, the malware now is peeking at your keystrokes, and it obtains your login information to your bank. In this case, your bank is, your ID is Steve the Sucker, and your password is I'm a moron. Step three, the devil gets from the malware that information, the Steve the Sucker and I'm a moron duality of information, and then logs in as you and transfers your money to him. That's the story of a cybercrime and what we want to avoid. If you've got a computer virus, if you get one of those little green guys installed, if you think, you suspect, run antivirus. Some examples of cyber crimes. I show first what's called in the trade the blue screen of death. That's something that would indicate malware has been installed. It looks like it's legit, and that number on the lower right looks like something you want to call, but it's a scam, ladies and gentlemen. The Microsoft, so-called Microsoft certified technicians will not be at the other end. They'll be there to collect personal information and steal your money. You see a pop-up like this when you go to some place on the web. Websites can be gamed, can have false links. When you click on it and see something like this, if it's too good to be true, use your common sense. Don't click. And last but not least, on this slide, this is an actual email that I received with some of the personal information smudged out. Dirk Saunders, with that crazy email address next to his name, sent me a note, and it actually had one of my passwords. And my first reaction was to shiver. I said, "Holy cow! How did Dirk, this jerk, get that?" Well, he probably got it through the dark, through a breach, and then wrote to me and threatened me. And I said to myself, "Well, the threat doesn't make any sense. I didn't do this." So I Googled the scenario in a sentence, and sure enough, this was a known scam. And it's an example of something. I mean, I've received this many times since the first incident was over 2 years ago, and I've received it many times since then by an assortment of scammers from all over the world. If you are a victim, you pay attention to the threat, you actually send them some Bitcoin or other remuneration, and realize it, sadly, that you are a scam victim, consult a professional to clean up your device. Call the police and contact your financial companies. This is a tutorial slide. I start from the bottom and go to the top. You're at home. What's important at home? For your devices, you want to have strong passwords. You want to use what's called two-factor authentication, and I'm going to, in a couple of slides from now, I'm going to talk in more detail about what two-factor authentication is, but that plus good passwords provide you protection when you access websites, when you use applications. You want to set up lock screens on your devices so that when you're away, if someone comes by, they can't have access to that device or use it. And if you lose the device, you want to focus a little bit on recovery. On the lower right, in terms of software protections, you want to run antivirus, set it up, keep it up to date, and that's what that word updates means. Pay attention when your software vendor like Microsoft, like Apple, provides an update to your operating system. You want to use it. Don't ignore it. Don't delay. Even just requests to do tune-ups can include fixes and close those openings in your operating system software. Backup is very important for your data. For those of us who have important files on their computers, now that I'm retired, my most important files are my tax returns. I want them backed up in case I need them. And I want to encrypt the contents of my devices and make sure that that backup is also encrypted. Moving up a little bit to the network ID box, my network ID or my Wi-Fi network, where the acronym that we see most frequently is SSID. You want to have a strong password for that. You want to, when you set it up, you want to set up with a firewall, and you want to set up with encryption. And the next slide talks a little more in detail about that. Looking now at the outside world, going from right to left. When you use your device with cellular data like an iPad or a smartphone, that's encrypted and protected. The transmission data is not freely open for scammers to view. But public Wi-Fi is a risk. And in general, I don't recommend using it unless, and if you go over to the far left under the outside world box, virtual private network or VPN is what you should invest in. That gives you privacy even from your internet service provider, and provides encryption through that avenue of communication. Very important when you're outside your home environment. Home setup, the column on the left, that's a one-time thing when you're actually just setting up your router for the first time. You want to make sure you've got a unique router ID and a strong password just to access the router. And you want to think, and this is something that I've forgotten in the past, check to update your firmware at least annually. That firmware can be attacked. If you go to I personally have an Asus router. There are different brands. Netgear is also a well-known brand. They are reputable, and they should be providing regular firmware updates that might correct openings for scammers. So pay attention to that advice. It's one of the 54. And on the right side, this is once you've set up your communication with your router. On the right side of the slide, you're now into setting up your Wi-Fi. Don't put a personal reference in the name of your Wi-Fi network. Now, in my case, the last thing I would call it Steve Krantz's Wi-Fi, because anyone in your neighborhood can listen, get a communication, and know that that's you. And so no personal reference in the name. Strong password, of course. Security and encryption is provided by selecting WPA2, which is the current standard for security for Wi-Fi, and make sure that remote management is turned off. And if these choices in your Wi-Fi setup are not obvious to you, or you're inexperienced, this is when you should be consulting a professional. Some examples of dopey passwords. I call it Passwords 101. It's hard to believe that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 was found 23 million times in breaches. It's a lesson that being sloppy and lazy and setting up passwords is a big mistake. Passwords 102. This is from NIST. And if you recall in Stan's deck, the framework NIST is one of the great organizations that provides clear, consistent, quality information to protect us. They recommend a memorable phrase. There's an example for those of you whose dog is named Spot. Spot has loved belly rubs since puppyhood. I'm going to change. We just got a puppy. His name is Cosmo, and I'm changing this slide to say Cosmo has loved belly rubs since puppyhood. I've got to update this slide. I'm glad I looked at it. If the password length is restricted, I suggest take the first letters of that phrase and use that as your password. You can check its strength, as you see there, passwordmeter.com. And if you, by the way, I've already provided a set of slides to the SIAM team, and so don't write all this stuff down. I know I'm going pretty quick. As I said before, change your passwords when a major breach occurs, and make sure you use different ones for different accounts. Special care for those financial sites, banks, credit cards, etc. Consider a password manager. I use one. A couple of good ones that I've read good reviews are Dashlane, LastPass. There are other good ones. I personally use a suite called Norton 360. It used to be called Security Premium Suite, but on their website you can see both names, I believe. It's a competitive password manager, but it covers all the bases. So that's why I personally have chosen that. Now, as I promised, two-factor authentication a little more in depth. Step one, I want to transfer money from my bank account to one of my children's bank accounts, something I sadly do every once in a while. I log into Bank of America, I have set up two-factor authentication on the Bank of America website. They send me a code that goes to my smartphone. That's step 2. And then step 3, I enter that number on my laptop, completing the chain of events, providing a two-factor protection. I strongly recommend that you invest in that and if you find that a financial site doesn't offer this, change banks, get a different credit card. Too risky. So again, use it if available. Consider some specialized apps that will such as Authy or Duo Mobile or Google Authenticator. Those will provide even stronger credential interchanges with your apps and websites. And one thing that's very important, and I talk about a little bit later, minimize sharing your cell phone with apps and worry about something called a SIM swap attack. And I'll be talking about that in a little bit, because SIM swap attacks are a way for scammers to defeat two-factor authentication. If you're really security concerned, consider a YubiKey. I drew a little picture pop up. It provides today the ultimate, not the end all be all, but the best. Let me say it this way: provides the most secure interchange for apps and websites. Couple of web browsing clues. Use those browser clues to determine website safety. You may not have noticed. This is a screen grab from Chrome. See that little lock indicates relatively secure. It implies that the interchange of data between your computer and the server, the web server, is encrypted and provides you that measure of security. Certainly you should demand that for any financial site. Not secure, if you see not secure, that's the way Chrome displays it. If it's a website that is just kind of a casual one, I don't see that as a problem. But if it's anything important to you financially or personally, you want to ensure that it's got that screen lock on the browser bar. So websites can be frauds. They can be gamed with phony ads. I showed you the example earlier. Enter the web address yourself if you're not sure. Avoid ad links in emails and texts. Establish accounts at important online services, such as Social Security, IRS. If I was talking to a senior audience, I would say Medicare, banks, credit cards, etc. Clean up the stale website account data annually. For apps, installing apps, stick to Apple's App Store or Google Play for any app installation. Avoid installing an app on your smart device that comes from a random website. It's risky. Apple, Google have standards that they apply to applications to get them published. Apple is the best, is stronger than Google. If you look at the statistics, Apple has far fewer scam apps, but still they exist. Be careful and stick with them. Trust is a trusted source. When you use an app, avoid, minimize contact sharing and location sharing unless mandatory. I mean, clearly for something like Waze, which is I use for GPS, you're going to give that app location sharing. But others that, why is it asking for this? Don't accept it. Don't do it. Remove your personal data first when you're removing apps. Log in, get rid of your personal data, and then follow your smartphone instructions for removing. Social media, limit your circles of communication to family, friends, and colleagues. Ignore unknown friend requests. Think about the wolf in Little Red Riding Hood at the beginning of this presentation. She was in trouble meeting that wolf. Establish accounts for major social media apps, and this is a general advice before a scammer does it for you. Even with these, assume everything you post is public. Be careful. Review security and privacy controls on the apps you use. And again, two-factor authentication. Here's one of my spam slide. I actually show real spam. I'm sure some of you are licking your lips right now. I personally have never eaten spam, actually. Misspellings, if you read this email, Many of you might have missed that priority was misspelled. I actually got this email, by the way. Misspelling. Once you see a misspelling, you have to, it's a red flag. This is sent by a scammer. Look at the web address. If it might have a 1-letter error, it's a trick. Sometimes it is camouflage though. So use the mouse over technique on web addresses in emails, because hidden behind what looks like a good address is a scammer's address in many cases. And finally, worry about ransomware, typically carried out using a Trojan, that is or a malware that's disguised as a legitimate file. Here's an example, and this is an interesting lesson that I rarely hear voiced, and I want to focus on this particular. This is an email from a personal friend, and it's nice to get, Yoga sent me real hugs. It's a lovely lady. I know her well. She sends a lot of these short emails and shares videos, etc. But somehow I saw that web address. It's an actual email, and I just got a queasy feeling in my stomach. I didn't feel comfortable clicking on that link. Well, what you should do, and what I did do, was I called her and I said, "Hey, Yoka, did you really send that?" And then turn it around. This is a lesson to us. If you are sending an email, like you want to share the latest joke about some politician, and you can't wait to send it to your best friend, make sure you put enough personal information in the note so they know it's from you. And that's really the best message from this slide is think about the other guy when you're going to send an email. This is quick. I'm not going to go into these. These are the 10 most 10 most popular phishing subject lines. It'll be in the slide deck for download. Talking about email and phishing, and that's the phishing with the PH. That's the phishing expeditions that the scammers use. First off, use your email program's option to block and report spam. Again, don't open an attachment that you don't trust. Don't click on a link unless you're sure of the source. If unsure of a link, you can enter it yourself or from your favorites or bookmarks. Texting and smishing. Smishing is a new word that I learned recently. I smile when I say it. I don't know why. I think it's a funny word. What smishing is phishing while texting. But texting itself is risky because it's mostly unencrypted. So don't put personal information, private information when you send texts. Again, when you get smished, when you get some random person, and a lot of that's going around now, especially with the political season, I get many smishes. Most are legit, but I'm very cautious and I avoid clicking on a link. If you want to report them, 7726 is sent to a centralized agency that will take action. Computer software. Software must be up to date. Use automatic software updates for your PC and Mac. That means your antivirus, and that means always. Security privacy suites, I commented earlier about that I use Norton 360. Both Windows and Mac offer for their computers, they offer suites of security. They're good. The commercial offerings try to be a little bit better. And the advantages I find in the commercial is they'll offer some extras like the password manager that you might have to buy separately, or the virtual private network that you might have to buy separately. Your files. Encrypt all your files. Use File Vault for Macs, BitLocker for Windows. Watch out for those flash drives. They're easy to steal. Keep them encrypted. Your phone. Use Touch ID or Face ID. I think most of us are already doing that, both for your iPhones and your Androids. My personal suggestion is make your security even better by taking a photo and editing in an email and an alternate phone number, like here. And here I show off my beautiful wife. That's my lock screen. That's her phone number and my email. So if I leave my phone in the wrong place, somebody, Good Samaritan, picks it up, they can get in touch with me and return it. Device security, and this, I promised to talk about this. Call your phone company if you haven't done this. As soon as I'm done, call your phone company and get a PIN access code. That will prevent a SIM swap attack because the scammer won't have that code, only you. And the phone company should challenge any caller for that PIN code. What would a scammer do before your PIN code? He calls up, he says, I'm Steve Krantz, here's my phone number, and I have other personal information that I got from the dark web. I want a SIM card, new SIM card. They send it. Once he plugs it into his phone, your phone's dead and he's in, and he can defeat a two-factor authentication. So get that PIN access code, ladies and gentlemen. App setting for privacy, I mentioned this earlier. Limit location sharing, limit contacts access. Very few apps should be requesting or receiving your access to your contacts. Scams and robocalls. Most of us already do this, know about it. If you add, what I recommend is add any known persons to your contacts as soon as possible. Then ignore all others, let it go to voicemail. And you can make this even easier by, for example, I use the Verizon call filter app. It identifies potential scam. Coming down to walking to the end, credit, freeze your credit. Maybe the most important thing, it's my number one on my 54-item checklist. There are 4 agencies, count them 4, I'm holding up 4 fingers, but I guess you can't see them. Equifax, TransUnion, Experian, and the little known Innovis. They all give you a PIN, keep it in a safe place, selectively unfreeze for new needs. Refreeze is also free. Get your free reports and file your taxes early. And now, this is something that I'll bet only a small percentage of you out there in cyberland are aware of. IP PIN, get an identity protection PIN from the IRS. I got one first time this year. My blood pressure improved dramatically when I knew that with that PIN, no one can submit my taxes except me. I do my taxes with TurboTax. It prompts for an IP PIN from the IRS. I entered it, and that makes it unique, and no one else can spoof it. So, second thing to do, your finances, protect your financial transactions, monitor your accounts. I use an app called Quicken that scans all my credit cards, investment accounts, bank accounts, gives me updates, and I can keep track of things. I once caught a scammer who had skimmed my debit card numbers. I've learned never to do that again. But by monitoring my financial accounts, I was able to prevent financial loss. Single device and set up alerts. Most credit card, debit card companies will set up alerts. In terms of identity theft insurance, consider it. It's offered many places. Norton 360 actually offers it, but freezing your credit mitigates the need for this significantly, preventing others from masquerading as you and getting credit in your name. In terms of payments, if you're doing payments online, as most of us do, only with an HTTPS website, which implies encrypted transfer. In-store, the in-store mobile payments such as Apple Pay, Samsung Pay, Google Pay are more secure than using a credit card. So consider them safer, faster, easier. Your file storage, what to keep and how long to keep it. I provide a list here. These should be familiar to most of us: your email, your browser data, legal, financial, business data, your photos, personal stuff. The files, I'm going to skip this slide in the interest of time because we're coming down to the end. This talks about technically local storage versus remote storage, but the focus is backup and recovery of files. No backup is risky, and frankly, I think is dumb unless you're really just using your device for fun and have no important information on it. Local backup is inexpensive, but I consider it's risky. Do we have disasters in California? Yeah. Remote backup is the best. I personally use Carbonite. I could use Norton, but I've been using Carbonite for years. I just had a crash, my first hardware crash on my laptop a few months ago. I was able to recover easily with Carbonite. A pleasure. Last subject, kick the bucket. For those of us who, like me, who are elderly, senior, Stan and I fit into that category. The traditional documents, you can see them there. Wills, trust, life insurance, blah, blah, blah. Make sure you add a kick the bucket letter. What's a kick the bucket letter? It includes the things that I write there: computer and smartphone access, critical file access, online accounts, passwords and PINs, printed copy and safe deposit box, safe place in the home. My opinion, very important. Final thoughts. Secure is a relative term. There is no completely secure. I mean, I made a lot of recommendations, a lot of suggestions, do's and don'ts. But at the end of the day, when you look at categories like website logins, network, passwords, there are things that are most secure, which I talked about most of these. In the middle, not so secure, pretty secure, and then the ones that are least secure, like public Wi-Fi, something that I would never use. Many of us are satisfied with a good ID and a password. And then I include some examples. The worst password, of course, is the word password. So what are my top 10? I promised and I succeeded in not going through the whole 54 because I'm sure you all would be asleep. Number 1, freeze your credit. Number 2, two-factor authentication. Number 3, your home router, non-personal SID, and strong password encryption. Software up-to-date, antivirus. 6, long, memorable, unique passwords. In email, don't click. You know this already. Maintain a remote backup. I just mentioned that. Create a smartphone lock screen. That's number 9. Think of my beautiful wife, which I do frequently. And number 10, kick the bucket letter. Those are my top 10. What are the must-haves? The 6 pins. 1, Experian. 2, TransUnion. 3, Equifax. 4, Innovus. Those 3 pins. Number 5, the cell phone provider pin. And last but not least, number 6, the identity protection pin at the IRS. There you go. How many have hands like that? I mean, I love, that's my favorite slide. Stan has just flashed his hand. He only has 5 fingers. He can't get the 6th. Security checklist, as mentioned, the 54 do's and don'ts. It's available. The checklist itself is available for download on my website. There's a shot of the cover of my book, which is available on Amazon. It's got me, but in written form. So last couple of slides, become a cyber guardian. Cybercrime's a reality. Make yourself hard to impersonate. There's a couple of examples. Know with whom you're communicating. And as Ben Franklin said, distrust and caution are the parents of security. And thank you, Stan, for allowing me to copy that quote from you. Stan is the source of great quotes. And last but not least, be prepared. Get your software updated, data backed up, kick the bucket letter, and then the bad guys go away. Any questions? Thanks for attending. There's my email. There's my web address. I recommend my son for personal support. Back to you, James.
Great, thank you so much, Dr. Krantz. If I could ask you to please end your screen share. And Dr. Stahl, if I could ask you to unmute your button. We have quite a few questions that came in, and it looks like we have about 12 minutes, so we'll try to get to all of them. So if we could keep the answers brief, that would help us get to more questions. The first one is, how safe are my children in the online gaming world?
Stan, did you want to talk about that, or?
No, go ahead.
I mean, in my book, I talk about that briefly. The risks for a gamer are pretty much the same as for the general users. But within gaming, there are risks within gaming because think of it as a frontier, as a Wild West environment where gamers are under tremendous pressure to keep updating their application. So one of the risks of gaming is that your child can be scammed within the game, and that's going to be game by game. The things I generally recommend, which is in my book under the subject of parenting, is if your child is a gamer, make them game and you're in the same room. And so you can have some oversight and some visibility and can say, Stevie, don't do that. I mean, that's a mistake, or I don't like that app. Please use this app. So parental oversight is maybe the best and shortest answer I can give.
Yeah, I concur with that as well. Yeah.
Okay, thank you both. Next question. Are you putting yourself at risk if you open an email but do not click on the links?
And I'm not aware of just opening an email should be just the software of the email, base program. So it should not be risky. It's only when you click on a link or an attachment that I believe the risk is. I've not heard a single example. And I don't know, Stan, have you?
Yeah. Well, to me, it's a good question because as a general rule, Steve, you're absolutely right. Most hacks come from clicking the link, opening up the attachment. The challenge always, and it goes to the distrust and caution quote of Ben Franklin's, is that the bad guys keep getting better. They keep learning how to do things. Certainly, if you have pictures so that they get downloaded when your email gets downloaded, if the graphics and all also get downloaded, there can be programs that run in the graphics. Even simple little things like, has this email been seen, by somebody? So, well, Steve is basically right. If you're, and it's probably for home users, I wouldn't be concerned. But if I'm working in a bank, if I'm working in a critical infrastructure, if I'm working for the Democratic National Committee, or God forbid, somebody I know might work for the Republicans, sorry if I offended anybody. But I would not. I'd be like super, 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 super cautious in those cases. You don't know what you don't know is the ultimate piece of that.
Right, of course. Next question, what is the most vulnerable point in a typical network, business and home, if they're different?
User.
The human.
The user is always that's the weak point. Something like in the area, 80-90%, maybe more, of all criminal activity taking place in a business starts with the human error. Clicking a link, opening an attachment, getting that phishing email, those kinds of things. So
exactly that example that you spoke about in your presentation, when for a moment you're distracted by something and you make a mistake. Wow, good. Thank you. Okay, Steve, I didn't know if you wanted to add to that. I'll move to the next question.
I was going to say the one-time setup of your home Wi-Fi network, setting up your router, if you need to do that right, because if you don't do that right, where, for example, your Wi-Fi name is something that anyone in the neighborhood would recognize, oh, that's Steve, that's a serious mistake. And individuals then can connect. And if they're bad guys, or you ever get into a battle with a neighbor, I mean, this happens, it can be problematic. So I would supplement Stan's completely correct response with setting up that network right. It's very important.
Okay, thank you both. Next question, should blockchain as a decentralized IS be considered as a replacement to EDI to further enhance security?
I don't know enough about exactly what the protocols would be and how they would be used. And if there's one rule in security beyond the things like distrust and caution that we've already talked about, it's that the devil is in the details.
Hmm.
And how are you going to do it? How are you going to set it up? Has the program been properly spec'd to use blockchain instead of EDI? Has it been tested? How do we know it works? How do we know it works right? And in the absence of that, distrust and caution are the parents of security. Trust but verify.
Steve, anything to add?
I agree with
Okay.
Stan.
Okay, great. Next question, how dangerous are public Wi-Fi networks?
Extremely, they're not encrypted.
Yeah,
Unless you're using a VPN, avoid it.
yeah. I completely agree. You can't trust them. And it goes in part to what are you doing on that public network, because sometimes it's your only alternative. So if I'm sitting at an airport, for example, and I'm on a public Wi-Fi, that I may use that on my iPhone or my iPad to read the news, but would I do any banking on it? Absolutely not.
So kind of the obvious things like banking and trading stocks, things like that, you would want to be, but reading things, news, things like
Yeah.
that, probably okay. All right.
But again, the emphasis is on the word probably. You're always
Yeah.
taking risk.
Right. Thank you. If someone helps you refresh your SSID, Verizon or AT&T, is it possible for them to hack your computer?
Sure. Depends what they've done. I mean, for example, what if they put on your router a little piece of software that as soon as your desktop connects to it, transfers over and now runs on your desktop. And now your desktop is under the remote control of whoever it was that put that program on your router.
I mean, I go back to what I said about if you're not sure about that setup, consult a professional, someone who will ensure that remote management is turned off, that WPA2 is selected as encryption, that the firewall option is selected, that the name of the SSID name is something, you know, like a password. Essentially, the name should be cryptic, not personally identifying. Those things are it's vital.
So if someone helped you, it sounds like it would be pretty easy for them to make an election on them that would give them access to something at a later
That's
time.
why the professional needs to be trustworthy.
Yeah.
Thank you. Next question, is using Apple, Google Pay safer than a physical credit card with a chip?
Yes.
Yeah. That near field communication and the fact that like with Apple Pay, I'm not familiar with the Google Pay, but with the Apple Pay, your credit card information doesn't actually leave your phone. A token gets sent and transmitted and is managed that way.
It's more private, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when given the option to use pay by phone or pay by watch, you would do that rather than a credit card.
That's right.
Excellent.
The other
Thank
piece
you.
in today's COVID environment,
Right.
less you touches anything, the better off we are.
Another definite advantage for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, next question. Free versus paid antivirus software worth the annual fee? Which free one is best?
So here's my take on that. I don't think there's a right answer or a wrong answer here. The most important thing to me that a user does is keep their computer patched and updated. If they do that, one antivirus program is as good as another antivirus program, more or less. Again, if you're getting more than antivirus, if it's also watching your network traffic, and if it also has a built-in firewall, and like Steve's has a password manager, you get those things bundled up. But more important than which antivirus is, are you patching regularly? And I've got a slide on that because one of the things that we at Secure the Village do every Sunday, we have a newsletter that goes out that includes in it a weekend patch report. If I can share my screen, I can show this. Let's see. Here we go. PowerPoint slideshow. Come on. There we go. So our news of the week includes that patch report, so that you know more or less what programs need to be patched. We don't track all programs. It's designed for home users, small office users, but we do a pretty good job of that. And that comes along right with the news itself, which keeps cybersecurity front of mind. So it's always there. And the quote is Sun Tzu is so appropriate here.
I was just reading that. I love that.
Yeah. It's important to know what's going on. It's important to know, both yourself, your enemy this way.
Very good.
And it includes that free weekend patch report. Right.
I would want to add the comments of brand. For example, Apple, to me, from a security point of view, is a good brand, and security is relative. Apple does an excellent job in vetting applications. For example, their operating system design, very secure. I mean, over the years, even though there are viruses that will attack an Apple device, but fewer than Windows. Apple has done a better job. So focusing on the brand, to me, makes sense with respect to antivirus software. In general, your software investment, it should be. I don't want brand XYZ that pops up on my screen. Oh, we're the best.
Right.
Use common sense. In my opinion, and I look, for example, some of my sources. I look at PC Magazine for reviews. I look at Consumer Reports; they provide reviews of software, quality software. For example, I trust Consumer Reports. So if they recommend a particular, I believe they do, they'll recommend. If they recommend it, I trust that brand. I'll go with it.
Yeah. And I'm a little more skeptical than Steve on that. Those are good touch points to look at, but it's always trust and verify. And that to me is the critical piece here. Don't assume just because somebody has said it, recommended it, even if that person's me, that everything's okay. Things change all the time. What Steve says about Apple is still true. It was more true in the past. Our news of the week, just last week or the week before, there was a major attack that hit Apple machines. It did not hit PC machines. So there's no set it and forget it rule, if you will. Cybersecurity, like anything else, it has to be managed. It's not set and forget.
I think we ended our broadcast on YouTube, but if you're okay, if you both agree, I'd like to squeeze in a couple more questions. Is that okay?
A couple more is fine. Yeah.
Great. We'll do them quickly. How vulnerable are Alexa, Siri voice command systems to hackers?
What was the question?
How vulnerable are Alexa, Siri voice command systems to hackers?
Everything's vulnerable. That's rule one.
I became aware recently of an anecdote of an individual who used Alexa to make a travel reservation, and what behind the scenes, someone had inserted for a travel reservation of a scam reservation. So the individual says, "I want to travel to London and give me the list of options. I want to buy a ticket." And it turned out that the cheapest ticket was a scam, but because he had minimal information, it was all voice and auditory. It turned out he was robbed. So that's not so much the Alexa issue, but it's the combination of the combination of things that can result in being scammed.
Right.
So the message I took from that was, when you're making travel reservations, don't use Alexa.
Yeah.
Don't use a digital assistant. So let me get to the last question. Is it safe to save docs in the cloud, or is it better not to do this?
Yeah. I save stuff in the cloud now. We're Office 365, which has space in the cloud to store things, and that's so much. I get access to it from everywhere. Microsoft is encrypting it. They do a good job of managing that. Again, it's commercially reasonable. You can use that in a HIPAA environment. I mean, they've managed that appropriately. So I feel perfectly comfortable using the Microsoft Office 365 OneDrive. That said, it's up to me or whoever the user is to make sure that they configure their OneDrive so that it's safe and secure. It's nothing's out of the box, everything's okay. It's up to us, the user, to go make sure that it works right, that its stuff is being properly protected. And, I would not store sensitive files at flybynight.com. No matter if they said we're highly encrypted, blah, 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 trust but verify has got to be one of the keystones.
You can't trust those marketing people, right?
Oh God, if only.
Fly by night. That was the guy who scammed Alexa. It was fly by night.
Was it to say, right? Yeah.
All right. So thank you. I really want to thank Dr. Stan Stahl, Dr. Steve Krantz. Thank you so much for being here today and giving your time and sharing this really wonderful information. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much. We also want to say thank you to our guest today. Thank you for joining us for this presentation. And just a quick reminder to everyone, if you'd like to learn more about that Weekend MBA program that happens at the end of August, just go to weekend.mba. You can learn more and you can register for the program. So with that, we want to say thank you to our visitors. Thank you all for coming.
Great. Thank you.